Welcome, friends. This is the weekly live Barricades podcast show. We are your hosts. I am Bojan Stanislavski. With me is Maria Chernat. Hi, Maria.
Thank you for having me on the show, Boyan.
So today we're going to start off with the most recent developments in Romania. And we've spoken many times about how the former Eastern Bloc countries in 1989, 30 years ago, proclaimed that they regain their sovereignty, how they are now going to uh, reformat the system in a way where they could self-govern themselves, where there would be no orders coming from the superior powers, like it allegedly used to be in the case of Soviet Union, and it's as it's often referred to in the right-wing propaganda, satellite states. And we were also criticizing this thesis many times because it just appeared, or appears not to be the case 30 years after the Berlin Wall fell. And we've spoken many times about the servitude of the Polish government towards the American one, of the Bulgarian government. And today, there's an occasion to speak about how this sort of colonial servitude, because we should call it for what it actually is, develops as a political culture, as a leading political trend in Romania. So, Maria, how about you just tell us about the most recent decisions of your government and how it all fits into the general framework, like COVID, financial transfers, what we spoke about last time on this program, which is the overwhelming poverty in Romania. Please, go ahead and just tell us about the new bright decisions of your ministers and your prime minister.
Well, let me begin by saying that a news surfaced in the media this week and it was not debated. This is the big difference because we are talking a lot about how obedient we were as an ex-Soviet country, but we never talk how obedient we are today towards a different power. And even raising some questions would lead someone to believe that you are somehow sponsored or you are doing the gains of of Russia, of China, or of another power. You cannot be a critical intellectual, an independent one. Whenever you raise some questions, the smearing process begins in Romania. But nevertheless, I will ask some questions and I will urge the viewers to do the same regarding the latest developments in terms of buying military equipment. What happened was that the Ministry of Defense, the Romanian Ministry of Defense, decided to buy for 137 million euros missiles by somehow bending the rules on public acquisitions of military equipment, that is, not organizing a proper auction where all the firms the companies that produce military equipment could come and present their offer, but the Ministry of Defense decided to directly buy from Raytheon, a famous company that is producing missiles and all sorts of military equipment, US-based company, and to invest this kind of money into buying military equipment. As we spoke earlier on this show, 32% at least of Romanian children or of Romania's children live in deep poverty, that is third world poverty. They go to bed hungry. I'm not talking here about poverty as a figure of speech, but as poverty as something very real, dangerous, and hitting the most vulnerable of our citizens. It seems this is of no concern for our Ministry of Defense, who decided to directly buy, with no auction, military equipment, expensive military equipment from Raytheon. To protect who, I may ask, since we are a failing nation, since we are not taking proper care of our citizens. I mean, the data, I haven't talked to you about that, but I want the viewers to pay attention to what I'm going to say. The data is showing that we have a declining population because less and less children are being born here. And this is not for no reason. We are not investing in education. We are not investing in the family. We are investing in referendums for defining the family, but not in financial aid for the family. The same government decided to attack the law that said that the child allowance should be raised. So they don't want to raise the child allowance, but they want to buy military equipment. And this is so, so sad, because we are on the way to underdevelopment. Buying equipment, military equipment in times of COVID-19 is something outrageous and very hard to explain. But the problem here is that the propaganda is so powerful that they don't even want to discuss. I mean, the intellectuals, the ones to claim to be very critical of the social democrats are suddenly very silent. And the military acquisitions were never criticized in the press. And I think it has to do with the fact that we are living at a time where the empire is hidden. Nobody says, like back in the days when we had the Ottoman Empire and the Romanian leaders would go there and literally buy their right to lead Romanian provinces. No, now it's all hidden under the disguise of being loyal to our NATO partners, of defending ourselves from the Russian threat, of defending ourselves from the Chinese threat. And under this language of security, as I call it, the security language, that is very pervasive and it's very present in the Romanian public arena, and it's very hard to be challenged because they have a whole network of people who would come and try literally to smear you. So Romanian intellectuals prefer to keep their heads down, unfortunately.
Yeah, so there are two, well, there are more actually interesting points in everything you said, but two which really struck me. The first is the question of, well, you summed it up, like presented it as if the bottom line is, generally speaking, the propaganda. Because, the question that started forming out in my head while you were explaining the situation was, how does anyone really allow that? I mean, this is so insane on its face. Like, hunger, poverty, everybody knows about that, right? It's not like the figures are hidden or they are like kept in some secret storage place. And only, I don't know, a few politicians could see that, right? Everybody knows about that, more or less. Like, we're talking about people that are who are interested in the public, whatever, public cause in general. So, and then, there's this huge crisis that hit us all, okay, which really, I'm talking about the, the lockdown and the COVID. And, if you look at it, it really resembles in terms of its strength and quality, it resembles results of a world war, really, especially in weak economies like ours. And now, instead of actually doing whatsoever, okay, in order to somehow, put things together because it's, our states are obviously, as you said it yourself, they are failing. They're failing every step of the way. Like nothing happens, everything, is getting more and more destructed and devastated. So, now out of the blue, they decide we're not even going to ask, we're not even going to make any public bidding. We're just going to go ahead and buy some whatever missiles, or planes, or tanks, or whatever from the American, from Raytheon, right? Which is one of the most aggressive American military industrial complex corporations. So the question that was, sort of popping up in my head was how does this happen? Like without any protest, without any sort of reaction. Uh, and okay, propaganda is one thing, and I understand that because we went through the same thing. Like we were constantly told, communism bad, everything which is not American bad, America good, American dream, American this sort of the culture that developed, that everything, and it was not only in the 90s, it was already in the 80s, that everything in America is fantastic, whereas here everything is not, is somehow sub quality. Then yeah, of course it had its effect, absolutely. But what is even more important is the second element that you said: no public figure will go ahead and try and confront these ludicrous on its face narrative. And this is why, this is one of the weakest constructions of the order that developed after 1989 in our countries, because these people, the public figures, they are presented as some sort of intelligentsia. They are presented as experts. They are presented as knowledgeable people. They are presented as those who have traveled and met important people and know about the world. And in fact, it's all absolutely false. In fact, they are the people of power, only of on different level. Like they do their propaganda PR bidding, and that's it. And I can also later on maybe speak about like how it develops in Poland, and how in certain in certain aspects, the Polish situation resembles the Romanian one, and the Bulgarian one for that matter. But you see, these people that have been installed in the public sphere in the 90s and in the first decade of the 21st century, they are constantly misrepresented as if they should be some sort of point of reference because of their knowledge, because of their capacity, because of whatever. And in fact, there's none. Like, most students, high school students, will be smarter than most of the people that appear on the on the political TV shows in Poland, okay, on the public TV. They will be smarter in terms even of their political analysis. So this is really the same sort of oppression that we have had before 1989. And this is so mythological, if you like, because everybody would keep saying, and this mythology works until today, that everything is now better because we have civic liberties, because we have free media. No, that's not true. We still have a sort of disinformation cartel, okay, only it's managed in a different way. And one could now discuss whether it's more or less efficient and so on and so forth, but it's essentially speaking, qualitatively speaking, it's pretty much the same situation. And the question that I would like to ask you, referring to the two that I posed already, is, someone is actually voting for those people, and they are. I would presume that the majority of the voters for the currently ruling party, and the prime minister and the whatever defense minister and so on and so forth, they're not voting for them because they buy military equipment from Raytheon. They are not voting for them because they are disregarding the poor and the vulnerable in Romania. They are not voting for them, for all these, because of all these pathologies that have been developing in Romania for the last decades, and they were, supervising them. So when it comes to voting for them, to support them, there's got to be something that they are buying the public trust with. And what is it?
Well, in my opinion, what helped the US and their allies gain and win the Cold War was a very subtle propaganda and a very skillful one. And what is it? Well, I cannot think of anything else but having a single story presented, like the Social Democrats, communism is Satan, and you must vote for the nice angels that will come and save you. Today, for instance, I listened to the candidate Nicu Șordan, who will run for the mayor's office here in Bucharest. And let me tell you that he uttered the term business like 30 times in his discourse. He wants to do a business-friendly environment. He wants to transform Dâmbovița, our river here in Bucharest, into a creative line. He wants to make the environment friendly for IT developers. These are his main problems, while we have entire neighborhoods that live in extreme poverty.
Yeah, so children that they need IT-friendly environment. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, of course, he wants to make a business-friendly and IT-friendly environment. So basically, the Romanians are buying that, and they think, and the clever move here was to make Romanians think that the corruption is the source of all evil, and we must take off and we must get rid of all the morally bankrupt social democrats, and then we'll have nice and honest politicians like this one that I'm mentioning, and all the things that we are challenging now, and all the bad things are going to go away. And another thing here that is so typical for this government is that they decided not only to buy missiles, military equipment, but they decided to basically financially support the stores in malls. I mean, the school is starting. We have a lot of children that don't have electronic device to go online. If their school closes down because of the COVID, we don't have a national program that would support these students to buy the electronic devices needed in order to go online if something happens at their school, which is a very plausible scenario. But we are financially supporting the stores in malls, in Romania's malls. This is the most obscene, outrageous, and unfortunately, no debate. This part, basically no debate. You would have expected Romanians to just rise up and demand their rights, but I think they are so depressed and so accustomed to the abuse that they don't even react anymore. It's a very sad situation where they don't find the necessary resources to fight back and to say enough is enough. We have a pandemic and you are deciding to support what? The stores in the malls? Who needs that in times like that? We have the highest percentage of people dead from COVID, since we are not able to treat them properly, and you decide to invest in the malls. This is basic.
Okay. But do you think that the element here could also, and I'm referring to both cases now, to the military equipment purchase plus the the support, the financial subsidies for whatever boutiques in shopping malls and so on and so forth. Do you think the element here could be fear and sort of synthetic artificial anxiety that is produced by the propaganda? Because we've had so many boogeymen, right? Like especially the Russians now. Uh, so I'm just sorry, I'm just thinking, whereas that could be playing a role here. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. I'm just speculating now that people are buying into that propaganda, and that's regarding the military equipment purchase. And the second is, you know, uh, this business obsession and entrepreneurship and all the rest of it. We went through the very same thing, and my interpretation of that was partially that it's also based on fear, because uh, people are used, and quite justifiably, and I think rationally, for the state and the institutions to organize public life. And since 1989, they were constantly told that no, the institutions aren't there to organize. Like, you organize everything yourself, around yourself, like maybe with your family and friends. And otherwise, the whole of the organization of public life has to go into the hands of the brightest, of the best, of those who can run companies and who dare to try, and who who want to challenge the reality, and so on and so forth. So it's like, if there's no business, if there are no entrepreneurs, the intimate thought here was that if there will be no business, everything's going to collapse, because the business, and we cannot rise the taxes because the businessmen are going to go abroad or something like that. That propaganda, I'm sure you know that. And I remember, even must have been like 10 years ago, on one of the, or maybe even a little more than that, but after 2000, I remember being invited to one TV show. At the time, I was a pretty active activist of the Polish left, and I was invited to a TV show to comment on many other current at the time affairs. But I heard from one of the interlocutors saying exactly this: that no, like, how can you even be speaking about raising taxes, and especially for companies? I mean, this is going to kill the business. The businessmen are going to go abroad. Do you know what's going to happen? It's going to be a disaster. And then I just raised my hands and said, let them go today. Please let them just go, and we're gonna get rid of them once and for good, and we're gonna start organizing our community, our economy, our state, our institutions, and all the rest of it, because they are constantly in the way. So do you think that fear plays an important role here?
Well, of course, it plays an important role. I mean, how else would you explain this type of fear, that they made us believe that all that counts here is the business environment, because they are the creative ones, they are the ones who are able to produce money, and all the rest, we are all just losers that are feeding and using this type of um, using their money, basically. So the idea is that how else could you explain the fact that we are not taxing nobody, we are not doing any form of measure against the business environment? It is as if you have the business sector, you have the business environment, and all the rest. This is how it is described. You say we have only 2 or 3 million Romanians that are hired in private companies, and all the others are living at the expense or on the backs of those hardworking people. All the rest are just parasites. And it is a very violent rhetoric that was imposed since President Băsescu was elected. He was the one that came up with this idea that we have 12 million people who are socially assisted by the 4 millions that are actually hired. As if the society is this type of family where you have a working member, and all the rest are just parasites that are feeding from the hard working men activity. And for so long in Romania, this has been the main and the only narrative presented. Nobody dared to challenge it. And we had some attempts by the left and by some people who are on the left, but they are not powerful enough. And unfortunately, even the social democrats are falling for this type of propaganda. As I told you, we had a ministry who in, I think it was 2018, I hope I'm not mistaken, but he said that we should simply abolish the minimum wage. So this was coming from a social democrat. And they also said that everybody should be in charge of paying their own taxes. So the government and the state will no longer be involved in collecting the taxes for for those who are hired and working. So nobody is really challenging this narrative. And people are believing, even people who are working for state institutions, even those, I found people who are working for national television or the national radio and are still promoting. They have a show called The Business Hour, where they invite an analyst who would say how the business is going and how Romania is not doing enough for the business environment. It's like an obsession. And we don't have forces powerful enough to challenge this, because you see, this is why today's propaganda is so skillful. Nobody comes to your door to shoot you or to send you to Siberia if you don't agree. But they deplatform you. They ignore you. So you don't have enough power to reach to the public and to challenge this type of narrative. This is the subtle way today's propaganda works, because nobody is being sent to Siberia. We even had he was somebody who owned a television, and he later on got involved in some businesses that led to his imprisonment, that said, you know what the freedom of the press means? It means that you are free to go if you don't say what I told you, what I'm telling you to say, if you don't write what I'm telling you to write. So this is basically the freedom of press, because it's more subtle and yet more efficient. It is an economic blackmail. You are not threatened in a way that you are going to go to Siberia, or you are going to be locked away in a dungeon, in a prison, if you don't agree with the official policy.
Unless you're Julian Assange, then yes.
Unless you're Julian Assange and you reveal some pretty dangerous materials, or Snowden or whatever, but you are being deplatformed and you are being silenced through other means. So
yeah, I understand that. I understand that, and I'm tempted to say I feel you, because this is exactly the repetition of the situation in Poland, and really step by step. I mean, you seem to be explaining what has been going on in Poland for the last say 20-25 years. It's like when from the moment when I started my conscious left-wing activism in the late 90s, let's say, I already by then the left had developed an agenda and a platform and suggestions and postulates in order to at least modify the way that things are unfolding and developing in Poland. And I remember that when I joined the Polish left in 1998, I joined a crowd of very active people, and very courageous people, by the way, as well, who were shouting at the tops of their lungs. They were like crying about things are going in a very, very wrong direction, and that it's going to either end up as some sort of authoritarian regime, or it's going to end up in a complete decay and a complete decadence of the statehood. And I like to joke sometimes that we're actually optimistic, because both things happen right now at the same time, simultaneously. But that was exactly our experience. We were canceled, and if we were allowed anywhere, then we were always treated like, public TV shows and stuff like that, then we were always looked at or treated as if we had just fallen from Mars or something like that. And we're just talking some complete nonsense, like people laughed at us, or kind of, dismissed us even without replying to our arguments and stuff like that. And of course, I hate saying that, but I mean, I told you so, right? I mean, this is where things are going. And of course, even now, despite the organoleptic evidence, okay, you can see every prediction that we had made happening, playing itself out before our very eyes today. No one gives a damn. No, like, no reactions, no validation, no no discussion, no invitation to discussion. No one, no one has phoned me, say, for the last 5 years or 6 years since the Law and Justice, started orchestrating this right-wing extremist rampage here. No one has phoned me and said, oh, Boyan, like, you were on our show something like 10 years ago, and it seems like you were right. Like, I mean, it seems like maybe you want to come again and tell us something, something different than we keep hearing. So, it's exactly, we complain now a lot about the cancel culture and about the new phenomenon around it, but in fact, it's an old phenomenon, really. I mean, it's been happening all along the so-called transition, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I got to say that it's a very difficult situation. But I also want to say that, and I don't know if the Romanian experience here is the same, but in Poland, the left, and I mean the establishment left, like the Social Democrats, okay, the ex whatever Communist Party, as they like to call it, and the so-called independent left, the groups that formed outside the parliamentary politics, they have consistently ignored and kind of mistreated the notion of owning their own media platforms. It was like either they didn't pay attention at all, or they closed down those that were still there running from before 1989. They shut them down. Or when they started opening new ones, then it was like every group for itself. Okay, so we were constantly switching from opportunism to sectarianism and back, and of course, like, it leads pretty much nowhere. But then the problem that I can see now is that despite the fact that the propaganda from the last whatever 30 years, the old propaganda that is still in force and in place in Romania, but it's kind of old here. It's the kind of status quo antes. It's like, it's not so strong, but still the left that is in the parliament today is still very careful, very obedient to the general narrative, very unwilling to actually strongly confront, and which is something that, for example, the kind of fear, the kind of, I don't know, neoliberal guardian that they have in their minds, okay, in their collective mind, the right wing doesn't have that. They are not afraid of anything. They just go ahead and they will tell you the most ludicrous story, okay, if they only detect that it could ignite, the public opinion, that there could be emotions and so on and so forth. So I was just, I was going to ask whether, do you have any registered attempts of forming a professional left-wing media apart from ours?
Apart from ours, no. We had this type of phenomenon, and right now we are going to sectarianism. We have people that actually got together at Demos, the Democracy and Solidarity Party. It was a moment of optimism, but a lot of people formed their own Facebook page, their own website. I think Barricada, not to brag or anything, but I think Barricada is the only one that it's holding its position for 4 years now. And I think it's a remarkable thing, given the fact that we live in such times where sectarianism, narcissism, and all the social evils are playing out. So, and especially at the left. So basically, no, they have no intention. And I kept telling them that it is so important to come together and to have a platform where we debate things that are going to challenge the mainstream narrative. But it doesn't seem like we have the necessary, I don't know, the necessary we are not rational enough yet, but maybe in the future it will come a time where a lot of people will come together and discuss this type of things, because there is no other way for us to challenge this type of ideas that are being unleashed and are proving to be so detrimental to our societies, but not to end in such a negative and pessimistic note. I want you to tell us, because you told me just a few moments before going live, you told me about some very interesting things going on in Poland with some sex educators running around schools and giving students pills to become, I don't know, transgender or something like that. And that is so interesting.
Yeah, so I think we're really, I mean, it is funny. I understand that it's funny. It's even funny to me, although I have to endure this. Okay, uh, but uh, but it really proves the point that we went to a very dark place where uh, there is no rationality. You spoke about rationality, and there is no rationality. There is no elements of the kind of thinking that we were used to, that we inherited from the Enlightenment. Okay, that this is a kind of it, like whole epochs, like in terms of philosophy, political science, sociology, and they were cancelled. Okay, now we live in a very peculiar pulp of right-wing extremist, absolutely nonsensical, let alone rational, uh, conspiracy theories. And it's been one after another. And of course, it started, it's been always around, but, it's been rather, well, a kind of peripheral element, except for the communists, because there was this conspiracy theory in the 90s and later on as well, that the communists are just, trying to hijack the country back again. And then, we had this conspiracy theory, which was a global one, about the Russians who want to, I don't know, rebuild the Warsaw Pact or something, and that kind of stuff. But it was never, it's always been crazy, but it was never as weird and as like paranoid as it is now, because even when you take the Russian scare, okay, the kind of the Russian boogeyman, you could find you could try and develop some sort of rational foundation to it, like, they took over Crimea, and of course no one explains anything afterwards, but at least that was something that you could use as a rational leverage, okay, that, they're expanding, they're like whatever, doing some sort of imperialist actions, and so on and so on and so forth. Of course, like, this is BS, but still, and whereas now, like, we spoke the last 3 weeks about the anti-LGBT homophobic hysteria here in that country. And I told you I told you about the repressions, I told you about the propaganda, I told you about pretty much anything that, that's been happening here. And it's been getting, and I'm sure you noticed that, and I'm sure our viewers noticed that too, it's been getting crazier and crazier week by week. So now it's what the fourth week of the most recent, okay, wave of propaganda against against the LGBT community. And now the ombudsman for children, I mean, I don't know the official name in English, the official translation of that position, but there is a governmental position of an ombudsman that looks after whether children's rights are respected. And of course, like most of the government and most of the civil servants appointed, by Law and Justice, he is a Catholic right-wing fundamentalist, of course. So he's been pretty silent for the last couple of years at least, and now suddenly he appeared on the public TV, and he said that there is a very serious problem. He really said that. Like, you can look it up on YouTube and stuff. Like, he said that there's this very serious problem, a dangerous problem, that there are sex ed specialists, sex educators that are just secretly running around schools all over Poland and are giving the students, I don't know whether they are forcing them or not, whether they're just like a bit like drug dealers, or like, he never specified that, but what they are doing is they're giving them special pills, after which, when you take them, your gender changes. Like, he really, really said that, okay? And this was so
thinking,
so beyond any sort of sanity, however you define that, okay, that there is a network, okay, it's a conspiracy, there's a network of people, and I'm just waiting to figure out who sponsors them, whether it's Soros or Putin, I don't know, but we'll figure it out probably by next week, by the next recording. I'm going to have some update about that, probably. So that they're just giving pharmacological, preparations to people who are just going to school, and I don't know even how they make their choice. Like, they look, for example, this guy there in the corner, I'm gonna give him that pill because he's gonna look good when he switches their gender from whatever male to female, or whatever, if they become transgender or something. So this is absolutely, totally crazy. And that's not the end of story. The Polish National Prosecution has actually announced it's launching an investigation into that, okay, of distributing illegal drugs in public schools. So that left me speechless. I mean, absolutely. I didn't know how to. If someone had told me that, if I was like on somewhere, like, for example, we are now live, right? And if the news had just arrived now, I wouldn't even know how to comment on that. And I can see that many of my friends, many of my comrades, they didn't know how to actually comment on that either. So the only response that they were able to come up with, and I can see that on social networks, are the kind of memes. For example, instead of aspirin, they change the subtitle to transpirin. Okay, so it's like, no, it's transpirin, and it like switches your gender within 24 hours. Super effective, like. And then there were people, for example, where half of the face is like belongs to a female, like looks like it's a female face, and the another half is like male face, and the subtitle reads something like "Never take half a pill" or something like that. So it's just, but really, I hate doing that. I hate these meme arguments, and I hate the memeization of arguments in general, because it sort of downplays the role of real arguments in a real debate. But how can you really respond to something like this? I mean, what could you possibly do? Like, where are you gonna go to tell them you're stupid? Like, you're just, you're dumb. Like, I mean, what are you even doing here with your position and stuff like? So we really live in a reality which is, insane. I mean, it really, we have detached ourselves from any sort of rational thinking, and the good element here, I think, is that it's actually over the top. I mean, this with the transgender, with the pills changing gender that are illegally distributed at schools, I think they've kind of broken the camel's back, because you never know which straw is actually going to break the camel's back. Because if you knew that this one would break it, then you wouldn't have put it on the camel. So they were just putting on, all the time and intensifying the hysteria. And finally, I think that people are just saying, okay, no, it's too much. I mean, this is like, even the law and justice supporters, I don't think they believe this, because it's so insane. So and the public and the national prosecution investigating it, it's just I'm sorry, but it's too much for everybody. But also, I just want to make one more reference to our discussion about Romania, because yeah, that's like the Polish circus continues, right? And we had this activist Margot. We spoke about them a couple of times, and she was finally released from jail, and she started giving interviews, and because she never succumbed to the oppositional culture, which is like, oh, democracy, values, freedom of speech, fantastic transition, detachment from communism, everything was great, everything was fantastic, and our opposition leaders and democracy. She never said anything. She said that she hates the situation now. She didn't like it before either, and she's going to continue fighting. She's probably going back to jail. She's not afraid of that. She's not going to play out like she's not going to pretend she's some sort of victim of whatever. She knows what she's doing, and every uh, you know at least I haven't heard of any other reaction, but everybody who belonged to this caste of oppositional influencers, they raged against her, that she is arrogant, she is unthankful, she doesn't understand. Like, these people who are actually fighting for something, who are actually doing something, okay, who are putting themselves out there and could be repressed for that, okay, they are being kicked by both sides, because no one really here wants anything to change for the better. The people ruling now, they want to have things as they like it now, because they are just like, it's an authoritarian, soft authoritarian regime, and they like it. And in the case of the current opposition, they just want things to be as they have been, okay? Not as Margot or myself or yourself or whoever on the left would have liked it to be. They just want things back as they were. And I think that's an important moment, because for the people who are actually actively interested in what's going on in politics, I think it's a moment of clarity, or at least it should be.
No, let's hope so. Very interesting information you gave us, Boyan. We've been talking a lot for a long time. I hope our viewers had the patience to follow our discussion, and see you again.
Yeah, never take half a pill.
Never take up